obviously I'm a realist. I would, if you offered me 25 grand a month or something, I'd consider it. If I had been aware of franchising, I probably would have bought one. The two people were like Ozzy Osbourne and Prince Charles, obviously now King Charles. Yeah. Demographically, from a lot of categories, you would treat them the same.
Constantly just trying to smash the thing in, and as you're pushing something in, something else popped out.
I'm hoping this will cotton on, but I think this is going to be like one of the first like FRM systems.
So, Adam Knight, welcome to the Disenfranchised. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm really good, thanks, Ed.
Fantastic, good to hear, and it's very nice to have you here in the studio and meet you for the second time now, isn't it? We met at the Franchise Social, I think, before.
Yeah. It's I've been really looking forward to this. Actually, it's not very often that I was going to say I'm allowed out, but I think it's not very often that I allow myself out to actually get out and do things that are a bit different and challenging and things like that. So I think this could be quite cool.
Yeah, no, it's good because obviously the other Adam, he's always the one out there on social media and videos and at networking events and things like that. So everyone, it's nice to see you.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Thank you. I do. Yeah, it is. Everyone loves Ad. He's a really lovely guy. It's not like I've got a whole raft of stories that could bring him down or anything like that. It's really I think someone did ask me that the other day. They were just like, he's so good on camera. He's always, when he's at networking events, he's just like, he's off, just like small talk, chatting. Everyone knows everyone's names, where they went on holiday, all this kind of stuff, which is like, he's the sort of antithesis of me, really. I can't remember, somebody said something like he must lose his temper, or he must be grumpy sometimes, and it's like, rather depressingly not. He is as nice and as personable and all of that kind of stuff in real life. It's quite depressing, really, but no, he's lovely.
Excellent. So let's get going with these questions then, and like I do with everybody, I want to start off by finding out, what was your very first job?
I think paper round was the first thing I was paid for. It didn't last for very long because it was quite hard work for almost no money. Yeah. And I think almost at that point I'd sort of worked out that I was basically unemployable. But it took me a few more years after that to get to that point. It was a paper round, and then I did it for about 2 months, and I then broke my arm playing football, and then obviously I probably could have carried on doing the paper round, but had decided at that point I really didn't want to for 2p a paper or whatever it was.
Career over.
Oh, yeah. That was it. Was a paper round.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think a lot of people do that as their first job, don't they? I somehow managed to escape that one, despite living in a village where
it's not a bad thing.
Excellent. So you mentioned there that you found out that you are unemployable. Talk me through that. How did you get to sort of that realisation, and what sort of jobs were you going through?
Yeah, getting sacked from a number of jobs, I think, probably was one of the main indicators that I wasn't probably suited to being employed. I think it was more that I didn't do very well in school. For quite a long time, I was lying on my CV about how well I did at school, because I thought I had 5 GCSEs, but I actually only had 4. It was only when we were going through all my certificates, when we were doing some admin stuff at home, my other half was like, you do realise you've actually only got 4. So I didn't, school didn't really suit me very much either. But as a consequence of that, obviously, there wasn't a massive kind of well-paying, really good jobs to go into. So I think I've done pretty much every kind of bottom level job that there's possible to have in and around Andover. So kind of, I was a driver's mate for a few weeks. I blew the leaves off the pavements with like a leaf blower for the little man to come along with his little like brush truck or whatever it's called. Sold flowers on a flower stall, worked in McDonald's, worked in Tesco's. Did lots and lots, like everything that were loading and unloading lorries, like just pretty soul destroying sort of clock watching type things. So I kind of fairly quickly worked out over a couple of years that wasn't, fairly quickly, over a couple of years, there wasn't a lot of choice. There wasn't a lot of choice. And this was also like I wouldn't say it was pre-internet, but internet was a very different landscape at that point. So like, it wasn't like you could just go and teach yourself how to do stuff and set up a business very, very easily. So I think there was one particular agency. I think it was a Deco. I'm not sure if they're around anymore, but I went into a Deco and I was just kind of like, look, I'm actually really good with computers. Can I do the aptitude test to get an office job? Because I was really fed up with being, out doing night shift, loading and unloading lorries, all that kind of stuff. And they said, they basically said no. And it took me about 2 months of doing, I basically said, look, I'll do whatever job you give me every single day if you will let me do. And they said, look, if you do that for a couple of months, because obviously I'm really tall and even then I was like reasonably strong. I thought they just thought, right, he's we could just put him in the physical jobs and that's great. Like he'll go and do those things. So I did the 2 months and kind of did all those horrible little jobs in between. Well, horrible to me anyway. I'm not sure, not everybody thinks of them like that, but I didn't enjoy them. So I did the office aptitude test and got 100% on all of them. And then the next day I was in Lloyd's TSB in their pension review unit, like running through pension scheme stuff. And it was still like a lot of admin, a lot of data entry, but it was actually using a computer rather than kind of physical manual things. So that was the kind of first time I had a job that wasn't just kind of hard graft.
Yeah.
And then, and I do sort of, I have some misgivings about the job I did there, because what then started was quite a long period of me doing myself out of jobs by either reworking or figuring out better ways of doing things, to the point where my usually temp job, because obviously this was a temp agency, a Deco, the sort of temp job didn't exist anymore because I sort of either made things better or improved things. And so like with the pension review stuff, like I found that there was a particular like archive department in some government place that actually had all of these little scheme booklets. This is really boring pension stuff, but like if you didn't have the scheme booklet and you were doing a review of whether someone was missold or not, you had to use this quite generous kind of default.
Right.
So Lloyd's wanted the booklets because it meant that they would not have to pay out so much money. Now, looking back on it, I now feel horrible that I was so good at that job, because I found loads and loads of booklets and basically saved Lloyd's loads of money, but then meant that a whole load of people that were missold pensions got less money. So that was another lesson in I don't really like working for big corporations type, businesses that sort of have their own balance sheets as the sort of...
It's interesting. Would you say that that's where you started to realise you had more skills than you thought you had? If you see what I mean. Like,
oh yeah, because I didn't, because obviously school hadn't gone well, so I didn't really think I had any skills, or because even now, like my maths is rubbish, my English is rubbish. Like I'm not rubbish, but I didn't come out of that situation or come out of school, and then I got kicked out of college twice as well for basically just not really going and not engaging with the whole thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. The reason I asked is because I think it was similar for me. So instead of moving around loads of jobs, I just stayed in one job for 8 years that was glorified manual labourer, basically. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I got into the office environment with a large corporate company doing recruitment that I realised actually I had some skill with sales and marketing and things like this and interacting with people.
Yeah.
And that kind of opened my eyes to some other possibilities, really, which I guess it gave me a little bit of confidence. And actually the more people I've spoken to, they've all had similar kinds of backgrounds where they've the entrepreneurial people anyway who've started up their own businesses and turned them into franchises. They've come from similar kind of backgrounds. Maybe they've got dyslexia, or they had a start where really they weren't going through degree to this professional career, and there must be something in that, right?
I think so. I think it's until you, so the one thing I can do sort of reliably and has quite a lot of value to it is I can go at a problem and not even really know very much about it at all. And even in and amongst, so I now obviously with the technology side of things, like do a lot with software and coding and things like that. In the last 3 or 4 months, I've sort of come up with some solutions technically to some really complicated coding things. And it's not that I do understand the sort of context and everything that's going on underneath the hood, but not to the same degree as some really, really very clever people that were also working on those things. And to put it in context as well, they've done all this brilliant genius stuff up to like this level, and then there's just one bit that just won't quite work, or it doesn't quite go together. And I think the thing that I can do is just kind of look at all of those variables in a problem and almost just sit there and try every single different combination of things. Whereas most people just kind of go like, this is too hard. This is going to take too long. I'll just go, well, we've got to find a way. There must be a way of doing it. And then just kind of sitting down and just banging my head against the wall for hours, days, weeks, trying to come up with a way of doing it. Yeah. And obviously the more you do that, the better you sort of tend to get at being able to figure out what's going to work, what's not going to work, and all those kind of things.
So you're a problem solver, and I think there should be like a job title like with that. Do you know what I mean? Because I think it's one of the most valuable things in an organisation is people that solve problems. Because typically the people that tend to go into management, they're the people that have got problem solving abilities and the ability to communicate those solutions with other people.
Yeah, so, I think it's like in HR world, I think is it soft skills? I think they're sort of that they put into the sort of category of, and I think it is that, and I think communication is a big part of that, because you need to be able to kind of extract everything out of the relevant people's brains to be able to do it and get all the context and nuance and background and everything to a particular situation. And then look at the actual kind of variables of what you can do with that. Is it data related? Is there a thing like telephone calls that need to happen, or do they need to happen at a particular time, or like is there scheduling issues? Like there's a multitude of different things in any of these kind of like usual like business problems. But not only do you have to sort of get the communication on the inside of it, on the inputs, you then, once you have sort of come up with a solution, and that solution usually will involve some sort of change. And this the other thing that about the other Adam that isn't he isn't necessarily lovely or brilliant with is that he hates change. Honestly, if the BBC football section ever changes like its design and layout, honestly, like for 2 days, he'll be in a right mood. But that's also really great, because the opposite side to that thing is that actually and like most people, they do like to know what's going on, and they like to have a routine, and they like things to work. So the opposite side to the sort of problem solving is, right, now we know how we're going to fix the problem. How do we now actually implement that? Because we're going to need to get people to change what they do, which is, I think in the business context, is one of the hardest things, whether it's you're trying to get customers to change the way that they do things by introducing your product or service, or internally, if you're trying to get people to change their processes and the things they do every day, that can also be really hard. So it's kind of I won't say that's my skill. It's not really a skill, but I think it's that mechanism where I think that's what I can actually do. Yeah. But you do also then need, because what I'm conscious of as well is that a business is usually a machine. And the thing that really interests me about franchising as well, and particularly when we first got involved, and me and Adam have been a part of Coconut for I think seven and a bit years. The thing that really fascinated me was that you have the normal sort of business machine that sort of everybody has, although obviously the structure of that tends to be a little bit different to, say, a big corporation that's trying to open lots and lots and lots of outlets. But it's just the nuances of that machinery. So the head office machinery and the way that has to work, and how there's such a large part of sort of recruitment and then kind of business maintenance, or I think facilities. Facilities, yeah. It's like there are certain really core parts of what a big corporation is, but franchising tends to sort of actually, when you get down to it, actually really focuses on those areas, because they're doing those critical roles usually for the whole network, or at least getting all of the infrastructure and the sort of planning and information pulled together in an easy to use and adopt way for the people that are obviously then coming in and being part of their network. So from my point of view of like problem solving, that was great, because there was a whole load of stuff to get my teeth into in terms of the people that Coconut were working with. And although Coconut obviously focuses on marketing, and when we first were involved it was much more just recruitment marketing, whereas it's now kind of expanded much more into it's still recruitment marketing is a real big solid piece of the kind of the mix of things that we're doing, but the sort of broader marketing of the business as a whole we now do specialize in, especially in the digital. Google ads and Facebook ads and Twitter and LinkedIn and all those kind of things, wherever their potential audience are going to be. So
let's jump back a little bit to yourself and your career then.
Okay.
So when did you first become self-employed, and what was that business?
I think the first time, there were 2 stints. So I think the first time I did it, I had been made redundant from a little telecoms company. And a friend of mine, previous to that, a friend of mine was in a band and they needed a website. And I had I did my usual, like, well, it can't be that hard. Bought a book on HTML and CSS and built them a website. And they were pretty happy with it, and people really liked it and thought it was really, really good. So I was like, okay, cool. Like maybe this is the thing. Like maybe if I could start my own little business doing this thing, which was called, I think I called it Midnight Media, with the night with my K being in the middle of it. So it looked a little bit cheesy. It's funny when you look back on these things at the time, you think it's like brilliant and like just looks like the best thing ever, and then you look back at it, you know, whatever it is, like 15 years later or whatever, and it's just like, oh my god.
That's the same as any like fashion sense at the time. You're like,
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was like, the fonts are just horrendous. So yeah, that was the first thing, and I did that for a few years. And to be honest, I think this is again why being part of a team in a business machine is a good idea, because what I was really bad at was admin and procedural things and invoicing and chasing money and all that kind of stuff. So I was very good at the creative bits and building websites and that kind of stuff, but not so good at all of the actual business admin processes. So that's why ultimately I had to kind of stop doing that, because I essentially literally just ran out of money. I think my other half, who had just decided to move jobs and then got pregnant and then had to kind of rescind her putting her notice in from her old job, because obviously she'd lose all her maternity and all that kind of business. That happened, and then I was like, yeah, I can't rely on my terrible admin to now sort of provide for my other half and my kid and myself. So then I got a job at a call center company, because I'd done that a few times before. You know, they're like it's like Moneypenny. I think do it in quite a lot in franchising. Like it's a company exactly like Moneypenny. Which is, funnily enough, is where I met Adam. So Adam was the marketing manager, Adam Lovelock. Not that I need to say his surname, everyone bloody knows him. So Adam Lovelock was the marketing manager there, but I was just in the call center. So I was doing the 350 calls a day. And again, that's pretty soul destroying. That's not a fun job. Like anyone who can sit and do that well is very needs a medal. Like it's a very difficult thing.
There are people that it suits. I know somebody that I've worked with who, just loves doing that kind of thing. I've done it, and it's
literally now. There's nothing you could do. You could offer me obviously I'm a realist. I would, if you offered me 25 grand a month or something, I'd consider it. But short of that, there's no way I'd do that sort of job again. But it did give me I met Ad. We played I went and played the five-a-side football with them and got to know Ad a little bit. And we talked to him. I think our first little business together was it was websites, but it was like a little wedding website thing. So it was like if you were getting married, you could basically set up your own little wedding website. This was again way before Facebook or any, you couldn't go onto John Lewis and set up your, shopping list or anything like that, or wedding list. So it was a very specific little thing. I think it was called For All Time, and that didn't do very well. That didn't work, and no one wanted to pay for that sort of thing at that point. Although it is a big business now, and we've met a couple of people who've done very, very well out of that sort of thing. Yeah. So I think we were a little bit ahead of the curve. But yeah, after the wedding website thing didn't pan out, we basically bought a license to use this particular bit of software, which had web hosting and email marketing and a little CRM thing in it. There's a whole bunch of little tools that were all sort of stuck together. And we ended up doing marketing for a few different people, and we sort of noticed that the email side of it was just working pretty well for everybody that did it. It didn't cost a huge amount of money. It was pretty, there was a fairly simple kind of logic to how you go about doing it. It was the time as well where it was sort of still reasonably early internet. So email marketing still works now, to be honest, pretty well compared to most different things. But at that point, it was working really, really, really well. So we decided to then sort of double down on that. And that's when we built Astonish Email, which was a separate little business that we set up, and that's still going and still has quite, sent millions and millions of email campaigns, and lots of people have used it over the years. We've never had I think because a few people have been like, oh great, you've got a software thing and it must do really well, and the only issue with it is that when you do build something like that and you're competing against somebody like MailChimp or Campaign Monitor or any of these big marketing companies, those guys spend like $25,000 a day on Google Ads and things like that. We're just never in a position to do any of those things, and that all of the things that me and Ad have ever done, because actually although it's on it's entrepreneurial stuff, and most people do talk about that in a singular sense, like, and I did set up the website thing by myself, like everything that sort of then started to work and we got a bit of traction on was when me and Ad started doing sort of stuff together at the same time.
Yeah, it's like completing the skill set, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, believe it or not, I'm not a fantastic salesman or social, I'm not great in social situations, which anyone that's ever seen me at like a BFA event will be able to testify to. There's a reason why I generally stay behind the camera and don't talk in public, but I am trying to get over that side of things. But Ad is obviously he's much better at just talking to people, networking, building relationships. Like he's much more suited to those things.
So I have the two of you then, who comes up with the ideas generally? Because it sounds like, you guys have chatted quite a bit and created, business after business. Obviously, you're now into coconut, and we're going to talk about the next step after that in a second. But who's coming up with the ideas?
I think there's always been a little bit of a kind of symbiotic, Andover pronunciation of that word. There's always been quite a symbiotic, I think, kind of way about it. So because Ad was obviously a marketing manager and did his degree in marketing, and then sort of all that marketing technology stuff, like, had sort of come around, and there was Salesforce and MailChimp and HubSpot and like all of these different online services that you could use. So all of that was around, and the business where we met and we were working in, obviously they were looking at technology, and the guy that ran that business was really into kind of automation and wanting to be able to kind of take advantage of all of these new things. So we were in and around that quite a bit. So quite a lot of our initial ideas along those things, whether it was websites or email or any of those kind of things, where they were there and we were doing them. So I think the idea to build our own version, I think, was probably my idea. But then as soon as but it's not like, ideas aren't, I know there's this whole thing about coming up with ideas and ideation and how do you do this and like what's the best way to get all creative with these things. And I think having ideas is worthwhile, and obviously it's something that's really, really important. Like you need to have an original idea to then,
point, isn't it?
It's a starting point. The original idea of maybe we could build our own email thing, to then the maybe year and a half between that and coming up with a first version, finding a clever developer to work with on it. Like there's a whole, there's thousands of steps between those things. And I think that did require, like, I'd never have been able to do that by myself, and Ad would never have been able to do it by herself. And I think that we got to a certain level with any of the things that we did before Coconut, where we kind of, I think we'd hit it a couple of times where it was like the skills that the two of us had, we couldn't go much further with that. Because one of the things we've never had is money. So both of us come from a pretty sort of working class background. Like Ad did go to university, but like, just like everybody else, like neither of us have ever had like huge amounts of startup money. Obviously when you do run businesses and you talk to other business owners, particularly male ones that are maybe 10, 15, 20 years older than I am. I'm 41. There's always a convenient lack of the property bubbles in the last 40 years that have actually helped to enable whatever their particular ideas were, and how that's aided them in their business setup and employing people. So sort of everything to the point of me and Ad getting involved in Coconut was literally just me and him trying everything and scrabbling around and trying to make things work. But I think we had got to a point, and then the opportunity came up to become involved in Coconut. I think they'd had a few people leave, and we had a call the one day, and then I think we drove up to Barnsley where they were based the next day. Obviously we're based in Andover. I think it took about 4 or 5 hours. Yeah. I think on the way back the next day it took like 7.5 or something. And I was like, we can't do this that often. But it seemed like a perfect opportunity. And to be honest, up to that point, we'd had a little bit of interaction with franchising. So in our email system, we had, I think it was a chain. It was like financial advisors. I can't remember the name of them off the top of my head, but there was some financial advisors that were a franchise, and they had a real problem in that they wanted their franchisees to do email marketing because it was really a really good thing to do. But they couldn't but they would have franchisees then signing up for their own things and sending out emails with horrible fonts and, crappy clip art and all that kind of stuff. They had no control over it. So we kind of said, okay, well, why don't we build a version of our system where you can create templates and you can lock certain parts so they can't change it and they can't change the font, but they can, they can either go and just send the templates wholesale, or they could go in and make some little tweaks if they wanted to. And I think that's where Adam then tried to focus some attention into franchising. So we obviously contacted various different marketing companies, one of which was Coconut. So when this opportunity did come along a little bit down the line, for me it was just a no-brainer. And I hate that term, no-brainer, because there was still quite a lot of thought involved. But it was just, actually, this is a really good opportunity. I was aware of franchising, but not to the proper degree. And to be honest, if I had been aware of franchising, I probably would have bought one several years before, and none of this would have happened. So maybe it was a good thing that I didn't know about it.
As I was listening to you speak then about the kind of relationship between you and the other Adam, it kind of feels like for a lot of people they are weighted to one skill set or another, right? Aren't they? Mm-hmm. And a lot of stories that I've heard are when they work with somebody who's the other side, who takes over the other side. And just through speaking to lots of people around the franchising industry, I've realised that the franchise is almost like that second person, if you know what I mean. So they can complement the skill sets
definitely.
That maybe you've got. And I've never thought of it as this kind of sentient being before, but maybe that's what it is, right? It's just the other side of you that needs that support. Because I think actually I'm experiencing it myself. There's gaps in what I'm doing in building out my business. And what I'm realising is it's very rare to be able to start a business on your own and have all the skill sets to be able to.
Oh yeah, it's impossible.
It's
impossible. Like it never happens. And I think I think one of the things hopefully that does come across about sort of Coconut as a business is that we do try and do things a little bit differently. We do try to sort of be authentic and human and not some corporate machine that just machine, like a machine that just works and churns out things. Like we want to do things differently, hence why we've done things like Franchise Fest and and now obviously sort of coming to moving into software with Franchise Cloud. Like we've tried to do things a little bit differently and look at whatever the particular problems are in those situations. So I think there's 2 points. Like this, the first point is definitely, and one of the key things between when we also were getting involved, when the opportunity came up to get involved with Coconut, was obviously, Sarah, who founded the business nearly 20 years ago. She was a very dynamic person. She had sort of really, created this brand around Coconut and what it did and all that kind of, and did a phenomenal job, like everybody. And it's one of the other reasons why it was a really good opportunity, because everyone in franchising knows who Coconut is. Pretty much everybody. And then Paul, who's also still a director. Not still a director. Paul's also a director with me and Adam. Paul has worked in franchising for a long time. Worked at Mac Tools. Done various different jobs. Like the numbers of franchisees he got into Mac Tools was ridiculous over a relatively short period of time. So he's really effective. Really knows his stuff when it comes to franchising. His background was as a bank. He was a bank manager in out-west. So I'm terrible at admin.
Yeah.
Paul was a bank manager.
Perfect.
Therefore, and Ad's a great, business development, relationship manager, like all of those kind of things. Like our particular, that mixture of sort of like, and now when it comes to ideas as well, like ideas can come from anywhere. And obviously we have a brilliant team of people too. So the ideas that might come up could come from anywhere and anybody. There's no play, like just because, even one of we outsource a few tasks. Like even if an outsourcer came back to us and said like, I was looking at this thing and actually like, I think if you guys did this way, maybe that would work. And I will take an idea from anywhere, and then it's just the practical bit of like, okay, cool. Like how could we take advantage of this? How do we work? Like but then rather than just my interpretation of it, it's actually from the business development side. How would that work? What are the considerations that we'd have to do? Like Paul from the admin side, from the structural side, like how. Yeah. So it is the key thing, I think, and it is also, I think, why franchising works so well, is that you are also buying into having that structure around you. I think from your point that you made earlier is 100% right. Like, that is what people are buying. And I think it's also why Coconut has always done really well on the franchise recruitment side, because we do a really kind of quite in-depth and large piece of work when we first start working with people about like who is the ideal franchisee, like who are the franchisees you've got, like who perform the best, who are just going at it hammer and tongs and will take any advice and any resources you give them and just run with it. And then we basically try and kind of model that and find ways then to, the marketing then comes in terms of how can we try and find more of these types of people. Although you do have to be careful, because sometimes with modeling, I saw this brilliant example the other day where they sort of had a whole bunch of statistics up, and it was like there was like a male, like 73 years of age, sort of lives in this particular place, lives in a castle, which kind of starts to give it away a little bit. But like the two people were like Ozzy Osbourne and Prince Charles, obviously now King Charles. Yeah. But they were both like, they demographically, if you were to look at numbers and statistics and in terms of like marketing personas and that kind of stuff, from a lot of categories, you would treat them the same. And obviously they are very, very, very different people. Yeah. So you can't just go by demographics. Like there's a whole nother level of kind of, it could be psychographics. I can't remember off the top of my head, but that's I think why we are fairly good at what we do in those respects, because we do sort of understand and can have a lot of consideration around those things. It's not just like let's make a nice looking ad. Yeah, there is a whole kind of
that's pretty cool.
A whole sub level to it.
To go into that level, because it's quite easy to sit there and learn a piece of software like Campaign Manager on LinkedIn or Facebook ads, whatever it is, and just tick the buttons that you want.
Yeah.
And just think, yeah, that's good enough.
Yeah,
it's close enough. And and actually, it doesn't hit the right people at the right time. So
not necessarily. And I think that's where and also because we have seen over, because like I said, me, Adam, Paul have been involved for 7 years, and we've seen a number of really big kind of agencies, usually via a Google partnership type arrangement as well, sort of come in to kind of franchising, and you'll see them with massive stands at the big events and stuff like that. And they sort of come and then they go again, because they'll outlay a bit of money. Google will help them because Google's great. Google is really good like that. If you're a partner and responsible for spending a lot of money with them, they do support you. But they just don't understand. Like they don't quite understand it. And it's not a parent-child relationship in franchising. Well, I mean, technically it is, but there is a relationship where, yes, they are. It's not just an office. Like there is a business owner. There is a very invested person in that business, and they're not just an employee. They're not just going to do exactly what the head office tells them to. Like some of them will. It's usually about 20% of them will basically just do what they're told, but they'll just respect the kind of experience and everything the head office has. You will have a whole bunch of maverick type people who like to do whatever they like to do. So that's why that doesn't always work out with those kind of bigger agencies coming in, because there is a lot of context and background and nuance to franchising that a lot of people, I think, take it for granted a little bit.
Yes, it's definitely unique. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So let's move on to Franchise Cloud then. So I've had a little look on the website, and I think I've got a fair grasp of what it is. But for people listening in, what was the problem that meant you decided to create Franchise Cloud?
Yeah, so we've been working. Coconut as a whole has worked in franchising for a long time, and it's worked with a lot of different franchisors. As part of that, we get to talk to lots of different franchisors, or their business development managers, or their regional guys, and franchisees about various problems that they have. I think one upshot of when you are like a marketing company is generally nowadays there's a lot of technology involved in that. So for one reason or another, over quite a long period of time, I ended up sort of having a lot of conversations with people about their CRM setups, how their data's stored, cloud storage, like how there's, getting servers set up, like how do you actually manage all this stuff, even, from a lot of really big companies of just running everything from Excel sheets. Yeah. It's quite surprising, but it's true. And we also spoke to quite a lot of people who were using franchise specific products that were a sort of combination of quite old technology that couldn't really be changed or customized or made made unique to that particular franchise's kind of operating methods. Or if they did have a little bit more customization to them, it was very, very expensive, sort of prohibitively, unless you were, a really, really big kind of multinational kind of outfit. So because obviously we'd built Astonish, 13, 14 years ago. So software development is something that I've done quite a lot of and done a reasonable job of it, I think. Yep. So in my head, I've been looking, since we sort of built Astonish and that sort of has been there, I've been looking for something to kind of then focus that onto, because the one thing, especially with sort of online software, is obviously in terms of a business model, if you get it right and you get product market fit and you do provide like a genuine value to the customers and it's really genuinely really useful, it's a really good market to be in. Yeah. So there is it's not just, there is an altruistic thing of like, I love solving problems. So to be able to talk to someone and they tell me a whole bunch of their problems, and then I can go, well, cool, we've got this thing that solves, 75% of those. And I can probably help you with some of the others with a little bit of, kind of jiggery pokery. It's a great feeling. Like I really like doing that again in my problem solving kind of mode. That's where a lot of this comes from. But similarly, so it does tick all the boxes from those point of views. So in terms of like what it actually is, I was
going to say, what
does it actually do? So most businesses obviously will have some sort of CRM system which helps them manage. It's not always just contacts and marketing things, but they'll have some sort of data reporting, data input, those kind of things. And a lot of those they work in the context of one business and one entity, but they start to fall down if you are a franchise where you have a head office, and then you could also have that you could have elements of maybe there's multinational at the top level, then there's national, then there's regional, then there's franchisees, or you could just have national and franchisees, or you could have franchisees and regional, and there's a whole combination of different makeups that can go into how a particular franchise is set up. So although the organizational structure is similar with a lot of these businesses, their actual day-to-day working practices are completely different. Yeah. So what we tried to do is kind of build a system that would know all of those things and be able to be kind of told that actually, like, this particular type of organization has a marketing manager, they have an accounts person, they have say it's someone that works in the children's sector, like they have teachers that teach particular types of lessons. All of those different types of people are going to need to access different files, different information, different resources, different training, and you also sort of need a bit of a context of like, well, who's seen what, who's read these documents, who's ticked this box to say they've accepted these things. Like there's a whole bunch of stuff which is essentially, for a lot of these businesses, a lot of franchises, is essentially being done manually. So we kind of looked at it and said, well, what if we create something where we build out this really great, functional, strong, kind of resilient structure of functionality, but we know that all of these businesses operate in slightly different ways. So then we just kind of left a layer. It's not like we've built 90% of it and then we left 10% unbuilt. We've built it all. It's been working internally for 2 years. We've been using it internally for 2 years with our customers at Coconut. And
that's quite a long testing period, isn't it? I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it is. I think obviously you also have to put the pandemic into the context of how long these things sort of take and go on, because obviously one of the things that became very apparent when we were talking to people was that up until probably the last few months, a lot of people haven't really been it's still in a position to kind of go, yeah, actually, I'd like to fundamentally change how we're operating our internal mechanisms.
Yeah.
That is now starting to sort of come out of it a little bit. And then we've got massive inflation just to throw another spanner in the works.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, I know from experience, I've tried to take external software and implement it into a franchise for franchise recruitment. So I was part of the team that were implementing it, and I don't know how to describe it. It's like trying to, I suppose it's the circle into a round peg into a square hole kind of analogy. You know, I just feel like I'm constantly just trying to smash the thing in, and as you're pushing something in, something else popped out and it didn't work because it wasn't designed for a franchise business, and so it created a lot of complications, a lot of headaches, to be honest.
Yes, it's 100%, and I think that's the like I think I call it like Frankenstein system. So that's kind of what a lot of companies end up with, because they do have to sort of make compromises in a lot of different areas. You end up with sort of various different systems kind of bolted onto each other. You know, people are downloading manual reports from one thing and uploading them into another place. There's lots of, and every separation you have in those things is like a hole for somebody to just forget to do a thing or not upload the thing, or somebody doesn't do this, or someone forgets this part, and it can have big kind of knock-on effects to things. So, I mean, but I think the main, like, if I was to sort of try and sum it up, is that, you know, we've had CRM systems for businesses for a long time. So I think, and I'm hoping this will cotton on, but I think this is going to be like one of the first like FRM systems. So it's like franchise relationship management for managing all of those things.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that term.
Internally and externally.
So what sets it apart from other CRM providers or software providers in the franchising space at the moment? Because I'm seeing more and more sort of pop up.
Yeah.
Maybe because there was a lot of time over COVID to go and investigate these things.
Definitely.
Right? But, what do you think is the big differentiator for Franchise Cloud?
Well, I think one of the main things is that you can never just start using it like today. There's to be honest as well, Coconut, for the reason we've done it this way is Coconut has kind of always worked this way. So like Coconut will never just go, right, okay, you want to do some advertising, cool, here's how much it's going to cost. Generally speaking, there's a discovery day type thing that we'll do with somebody, a strategy meeting, which the client pays for. Yeah, and we'll sort of run through a whole process of like literally what they're doing, their structures, what the personnel are doing within their structures. Like there's a whole thing we run through, and we've replicated the whole thing for Franchise Cloud too. So essentially, we all run through like all of the systems, like where's your data held, what needs reporting on, where are you pulling that, like are you pulling in all of that information from anywhere particular at the moment? There is some technical, for the digital marketing stuff that can be factored into the system too. But essentially it's a place where you can kind of run all of those kind of threads of a franchise business in one place. So it's to give you, as a franchisor, it's to give you that kind of top level view of everything that's going on, to the point of being able to see, which franchisees have looked through all of the training materials. So just to give an example, we had a kind of recurring thread in the conversations we were having with franchisors where just providing answers to franchisees was an issue. And they would have Facebook groups that were set up for those sort of communications. They would, some of them use ticketing systems. There's a whole load of different ways of solving the problem. But actually, when I sort of then not pushed back on the question, but I would sort of say to them, okay, well, do you think it's usually some sort of usual suspects? Like, are there just people who basically can't be bothered to learn the answers to those questions? So therefore, whenever something comes up 2 weeks later down the line, they just ask the same question again. And more than a handful of people have come back and gone, actually, there's like 3 or 4 people that just consistently are just coming and trying to get that information from other people. And I said, well, that's great, because what the system would let you do is you load all of your resources, all your operations manual, all of your training resources, marketing resources, anything you need, you can load into the system. And then you can see what every user's looking at. So you can see like whether they've looked at particular documents. Yeah. We can go as far as to have like tick boxes if there's like training resources, so someone can read through the thing. You can load videos in, images in, put whatever content in you need. And then you'd be able to tick, when the franchisees then run through it, or their staff or their teachers or whoever it is within their business are running through those training materials, you can then keep a track of who has been through the training, who's acknowledged everything. So it's just try and give as bigger as sort of more as most a direct view into the kind of internal workings, because essentially when you are a franchisor, I think, and I haven't spoken to quite a lot of them now, I think I've got a pretty good grasp of this, like it's almost like herding cats. There's so many different, or keeping plates spinning, there's so many things going on all the time. Actually having a really good sense of like what's happening right now is really hard, which obviously when you need to make good business decisions is something that's really critical.
So I'm hearing a lot of how this benefits the franchisor, which is pretty cool. And there's other things that I've noted down here, like there's a network directory for other franchisees to interact with each other, and there's messaging that's secure, and marketing tools, payments are all done through the system, which I think are all really, really cool. But what do you think is the main benefit to franchisees? So not the franchisor, but the franchisees.
I think just having it's that thing of having everything in one place. So we can also, for all the customers we've got on so far, everybody has some external links. So it's even like when you work in and around technology stuff, you take for granted, even like most people don't actually know how to bookmark things in their browser properly, like genuinely, like they really don't. So it's just having one place that they can go to log in, and it will give them a link. You can give them links to then everything that they need to do, whether there's specific information resources or particular legislation or particular government forms they need to fill out, whatever it might be. You can direct them to all of those places. If they need to like input data on like monthly reporting on their revenue numbers, or because sometimes that isn't all automated. Surprisingly, quite a lot it's sort of a manual process. All of those kind of things can be done within the system. So from the franchisee's point of view, it's just a case of giving them one place to go to. They can also ask questions in that place. So they can ask questions that go direct to the franchisor. And obviously those replies will come directly straight back to them, which again just stops that kind of, what it's like. You email somebody and ask a question, they reply, that's great. Like 2.5 months later, when you sort of then think, oh, actually, what was the answer to that question? Like going back and trying to dig through. So it's like keeping all those critical pieces of communication in one place.
Cool. And I know from my own experience of setting up a business that it can get really difficult for your brain to keep up with where everything is in the tech stack that you're using. You've got communications over here with maybe Google, and then I'm using Word on Microsoft, and then I'm going over here for something else, and so having all the essentials, the critical stuff, like you say, in one place for the franchise.
Yeah, but even like managing those things as well. So like we were working with one franchisor quite recently, who was basically having a member of staff at head office pretty much spending not all of their time, but I'd say the majority of their time just managing permissions on things like Google Drive. Yeah. So they had sort of not transient like members of staff for the franchisees, but they would have people that would be on for like a term and then not on for a term. And so they had to sort of manually go into Google Drive and turn on and off permissions and remove people from certain folders and structures, and because that's where all of their information was stored. So what I literally got them to do was go through and do a bit of an audit and go, right, what's actually relevant, what's old, what can we get rid of, get to the actual definitive stuff that we need. Then that's all loaded. They've then loaded that all into the system, into the categories that they've described. So we don't have like when you just load up a project or when I load up a project in the system, like the names of all the different categories and folders don't exist. They're set up specifically for the particular business and their structure and how they work. So we loaded all of that stuff in for them. And then all they then do is that then the head office can then add the members of staff that they need to. And then we have personas that can just be switched on and off. So it goes from being something that's being manually done in Google Drive, whose user interface is horrible to use for anybody that ever has to, to something that's very simple that you can just kind of run through and tick on and off. So it's gone from taking, hours and hours and hours and hours a week to a couple of hours a week. And I think that's what we're quite keen to do from now going forwards, because obviously the system, like systems, I don't think a system like this is ever necessarily finished. because we're constantly now having conversations with different franchisors that are highlighting different issues and different problems, and it might be that they just haven't quite considered that there could be a technological answer to some of these questions. So when we have those conversations, if it turns out there's some commonalities in those things and there's like a core functionality that could solve quite a few of them with that little customization layer over the top, I think that's where that it could be that the most useful thing that's going to be in Franchise Cloud doesn't actually exist yet, because we haven't had enough of those conversations. And obviously we've focused on this country so far because this is where Coconut is and Coconut's relationships are. But there's absolutely no reason why this can't be used by any franchise organization in the world. So we're going to be having a lot more conversations, and they're going to have different legislation issues and all those kind of things.
So this is ideal for you then, isn't it? Ideal for you personally then, because it's an ongoing problem to solve, isn't it? There's always another problem coming through, which is, is where you seem to thrive and enjoy. But it's great for the franchisors because it can be tailored and be, and develop as their business develops and finds these new challenges. So I think it's making that kind of relationship between the two parties, and it's almost like that franchise or franchisee relationship, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? You're partnering them in a way to help them with ongoing problems.
100%. It wouldn't. To be honest, I think unless you have a really specific need. So like if you need to take payments, then whatever business it is, particularly with Stripe Connect, like you could use Stripe and you could take payments, and you can have a parent-child relationship within Stripe using Stripe Connect. So that's a very specific use of one product where you can basically just go and within a couple of hours be signed up. But I think where there are all of these different organizational factors that come in, like there shouldn't be an off-the-shelf product that will work in that situation, because you can't anticipate the hundreds of probably thousands of variables that are in play. So I think that's where there'll always be, like, if anyone ever wants to talk to us about Franchise Cloud, there will always be a conversation to be had. And there's also like massive value for us just in having conversations with people about the technology stuff. So even though someone might decide that actually it's not quite for them, or they're okay at the minute and it's not so much of a big problem, us just hearing these issues is going to directly feed into exactly, the sort of solutions that come out in the future. And hopefully it does become, we want it to be successful. We want to do really well out of it. But the byproduct, the only way it will ever do that is if a whole bunch of franchisors use it and it's really useful and it helps them and it helps their franchisees. So it's kind of, we're sort of dependent on, it's not like we've just built a thing and then gone, there we go, that's it. It's perfect. It will do exactly what you need it to.
It's another symbiotic relationship, isn't it?
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Excellent. So, conscious of time now, so I'm going to ask my last three questions to you.
Cool.
The first one being, what funny, weird, or strange stories have you got that you're happy to share from your career?
I did have a think about this the other day. I think I might have been going back and watching some of your other episodes, and really boringly, I don't think there's been anything particularly weird or strange. It's all been, when you're sat at a computer typing code, mostly, like I've knocked a few drinks over, that's about as exciting as it gets. But I think I did think of one thing, which was, what did I think of? I think the issue, so I remember what it is. So it was basically about a thing that I worked on that did really well and saved loads and loads of time. And I got a £50 voucher for it from the employer at the time. And it was more like, that was a massive indicator for, like, this isn't a good world to be in.
Yeah.
But that's not really strange.
No. Do you know what? I had a similar kind of thing where I was at a company for 5 years and, done pretty well. And it was in a commission-based role, so I was getting sort of rewarded for it. But I got a laminated piece of paper saying congratulations on your 5 years and £50. And at the time I was earning thousands in commission.
Yeah. So it's like, literally, what's the point?
£50. I was like, really? Like, take me out for a meal. That costs the same, but I'd be more appreciated than just £50 into my bank account. It wasn't even in my hand.
Yeah.
It was so weird.
I don't even think I didn't. It wasn't £50. It was a £50 voucher. So the thing was, I literally built like an intranet system using the website building stuff I was doing for this particular company, working in a call center. And it set like we worked out that it saved 18,000 hours a year in this particular department, because it's quite a big tool. So it basically just brought all the information into one place, which is a recurring theme, rather than having to phone loads of people to find out the information. So it just like centralized everything. And so we went through that. There was a big presentation. Like they were like, wow, this is brilliant. Maybe like we really need to take this concept and like build it out properly into the whole company. But I wasn't involved in that. They were just like, brilliant, thanks for that. And then go back to the call center and here's a £50. I think it might have been a Waitrose voucher or something like that. But I was just kind of like, yeah, this is not.
Get people.
This is not. I don't want to live here anymore.
Cool. So let's jump on to the next question then, and it might be it's going to be very different to that answer, I think. But what's been your proudest or most inspiring moment?
I think probably just getting through the last few years. I think it's been like, I think it was obviously I was coming to chat to you today. Like I thought to myself, like, my timeline is now shot to pieces, I think, as a consequence of the last 2 years. So I can't actually remember like when anything specifically happened. But I think just getting through it and everyone sort of still being around. Like obviously we had to make some massive adaptations really quickly. When the first lockdowns kicked in, like we lost a massive swathe of our business like within a week. So we had to make some really big changes, which we did. But we kept everyone, we kept everyone there, kept everyone working.
Cool. So final question then. Now I'm always trying to look for a perspective from somebody who's potentially joining the franchising industry as a franchisee. So for anybody who's potentially going to invest in a franchise license, no matter what brand it is, what would your one piece of advice be?
I think from the franchise recruitment work that Coconut has done a vast amount of over the last 20 years, I would definitely just say that make sure that it is a fit personality wise obviously there are going to be different personalities at the head office, but usually a really good franchise brand will, the leader of that will instill sort of elements of their own personality into the business and into the staff that are in and around it. So sort of given the choice between something that might make you a little bit more money, but something that feels like you like those people and that you fit in with those and you kind of recognize some of the traits that you value in people in them, I would 100% say that that's if we also interview a lot of franchisees when we do start working with people about what's good and what's bad and those kind of things. And I think that's the bit, it's being part of that team and feeling like you're supported and you've got that sort of network there. I think that would be the main thing, is just make sure that that's absolutely right. Obviously financials are really important. But if that's not right, it's really hard to fix that problem.
Fantastic. Adam, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you and getting to know the other Adam from Coconut. So thanks for your time.
Ed. No worries, mate.
Take care.